Welcome to the Get Out Swim podcast, where we discuss all aspects of competitive swimming. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and I'm a former Division I swimmer and current college and age group swim coach. Today, I'm joined by one of the great leaders of our sport, Coach George Kennedy. George is currently in his 7th season as an assistant coach for Loyola University Maryland. Prior to joining the Greyhounds, Kennedy spent 31 seasons as the head coach for Johns Hopkins University men's and women's swimming teams. During his time at Hopkins, Kennedy mentored 24 conference championship teams, 31 national champions, and nearly 1,500 All-Americans. Kennedy was recognized as NCAA Division III Coach of the Year, was inducted to the Johns Hopkins Hall of Fame, and in 2014, Fortune named Kennedy one of the world's 50 greatest leaders. In our conversation, George tells us about some of his early mentors, what led him to coach in Division III, how he grew the Johns Hopkins program to be one of the most successful in the country, and lastly, George shares a recent Get Out Swim challenge at Loyola University Maryland. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Coach George Kennedy. Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by one of the great leaders in our sport of swimming, George Kennedy. So, George, thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Seamus. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, why don't you tell us about your background in the sport of swimming, sort of how you how you got into the sport and how you got into coaching. I want to know who were some of those early mentors that led to inspire you to start coaching.
Sure. It's really interesting. I grew up in a small town in southern New Jersey, and there's a strong summer league program there. But my older sister, we were playing tackle football in the backyard. And, back in those days, you played tackle, none of the touch stuff, So she broke her collarbone. And the doctor actually, back then, they put the collarbone in a cast, and the doctor set the cast too tight. So I was 5 at the time. She was 7, and the doctors who were taking good care of her after that, she was partially paralyzed. So they said the best exercise would be swimming. So it was really a broken collarbone from a sister playing football that got me involved in the sport at first. And it was just one of those things where, it was a sport that I took to really quickly. Was a big kid as a little kid. It kind of that's an interesting play on words, but was tall for my age, and swimming became a really good sport for me. I wasn't real quick on the land. Loves land sports, but yeah. So we started that way, summer league, and then a low key club program in a 20-yard pool. But the first swim coach I had was a real role model. He was a football player, a collegiate football player who swam in high school, but during the summers would work at our pool. And he, at one point in time, just was so encouraging. And our 8 and under relay won the local meet and that type of thing. And he was an enthusiastic guy. He said, we broke the national record, but who knows if there even was a national record at that point for an 8 and under relay. And it was mixed. It was, we were the only team that had three guys and a young lady, and we beat all the teams with 4 boys, which was really fun. But his leadership was great, and to the extent where when I was 10, my dad and I went down to watch him play in his last football game at the University of North Carolina. And I had said at that point that, hey, I love this place. And, 7 years later, I applied and then went to the University of North Carolina. So my hero was there, and that's where I said I was going to go, and I ended up there. It was just really cool. And another man in our life who was big in coaching was Lee Steller. He was he had swum at Grove City University or College. And so he kind of drilled into me at an early age that you could swim at, you don't have to go to, Alabama or a place like that to swim. But those two are probably my main role models, is to become a coach as a young person. And went from there, taught a lot of swim lessons with the summer league. I started really coaching when I was like 13 or 14. parents would ask me to do swim lessons for their kids at $2 for a half hour. And went from there to coaching the summer league to helping coach after I graduated at North Carolina, and then moving into Division III at Gettysburg. So yeah, it was great experiences all through. I loved what I was doing. So yeah.
That's great. I got a couple questions here. One, what would you say your favorite or best stroke was as a swimmer?
Yeah, I was as a young swimmer, I was most accomplished in butterfly and backstroke, and then as soon as butterfly became more than one length, being a big kid and I just could bowl my way through it. It wasn't a pretty stroke, but my backstroke was more of a finesse stroke. I became a backstroker as we developed, and the breaststroke, I just never did breaststroke enough to have a decent IM. But I would say backstroke and then free and fly after that. Yeah. So
Nice. Yeah, I'm a fellow backstroker here too, so I like to hear
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Well, good. And then, within the kind of couple coaches you mentioned there, sort of just having that early inspiration to start, your coaching career. Were there any personalities, or I would say qualities within like Coach Lee, that you just resonated with? Like, hey, I really like the way he motivates us as swimmers, or I like the way, he just inspires us. And that's something that, I want to emulate in my own coaching style. Were there any sort of glimpses of what they did that, yeah, you just really resonated with?
yeah. I really resonated with with the summer league. The head coach, this guy who went to North Carolina, his name was Bo Wood. He made it fun. I mean, he was more of like an all around athlete. So we would play some games in the water. We'd work a lot on relay starts. We did some things that a lot of the coaches are doing now. Not just pounding yards up and down the pool. And who wants to do that with an 8-year-old anyhow? But he also instilled in us the importance of being, even at a young age, he encouraged us to kind of be fit. We'd play little touch football on the front lawn of the pool and all that. And it's got us enjoying being around the environment, and I think that's really important. So that I think that's one real quality of a good coach is that they create the environment for which an athlete wants to come in and take the responsibility. So at a young age, the environment was set, and also with the small club team I was in, we had a lot of fun because we were just a pretty, a slow team. We weren't real great, but we'd go over to Philadelphia and go to the big meets, and just everything was kind of positive. It was about trying to improve, and I really got some value from coaches who just didn't care so much about where you were, but where you wanted to go. And work with you towards those goals. One more man I'd like to mention is our high school coach, a man named Al Thomas, and he let he was more of a baseball coach who coached swimming, but he would win high school state titles by letting the captains run the practices. So it was really interesting that one of the things we started to do at Hopkins down the road on Friday afternoons was we had a lot of peer coaching going on. So that ability for a coach to trust the athletes enough that they could teach the skill is really important.
Yeah, a few things you mentioned there. One, creating the environment for sure. I think that's so important. As a leader, as a head coach. I noticed from my first 2 years in college coaching at Wesleyan University with Coach Peter Solomon, that was his mantra that he sort of just instilled in me pretty quickly was, hey, happy swimmers are fast swimmers. We want them to succeed, just as much as they want to succeed themselves, but we can't do that without creating, positivity and a sense of just pride and fun on this pool deck every day. So I like, I like that piece of just creating that environment. And then I would say with the captain run practices, that's really cool to me because I have seen before coaches who, give sort of that allowance for their captains, or it could even be at the age group swim level where you sort of have like the peer mentoring. And ultimately, and I'm not sure if this was what you noticed in the case at Hopkins when you started doing it, but I feel like it just gets the swimmers that much more involved. Like, hey, if I can, watch you as a teammate and sort of pick apart your stroke, well, now I'm starting to sort of, see it in my own mind,
Right.
it just gives a different level of coaching, sort of like peer coaching. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, we would do that Friday afternoons, and they'd look forward to it. Every other college student is doing something that's not great for their bodies on Friday afternoons, and they're doing stuff that's great. So we wanted to make it fun. And with the peer coaching, they also, I mean, it's like the old adage that if you can learn something well enough to teach it, you're going to grow from that. And feel that that was a really important part. Invariably I get we go, and who were leaders during the week and did a great job all week. Wasn't necessarily the fastest folks, but they might be the one. We would have stations, one working on flip turns, one working on relay starts, and they would get to work with the athletes, and the coaches would walk around almost like football. The head football coach sometimes up in the tower watching. We were just walking around the deck, making sure each of the stations were running on time. So yeah, it's cool. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, that's great. Great. Well, I want to sort of pick your brain a little bit more about just what led you to want to pursue coaching at the Division III level. I know you sort of stayed at UNC to pursue a master's and sort of segue into some assistant coaching on the deck there, but then ultimately you took the head coaching job at Gettysburg College, and that segued into a longer career at Johns Hopkins. So just what led you to want to pursue that at the Division III level?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's probably my background. I loved all sports. It's not like if you went into Division I that you could, for sure you want to love all sports, but there was a piece of me that I was as much into the relationships I had with the other staff members at UNC. Met some of the assistant coaches from the other sports. When I was at Gettysburg, really enjoyed camaraderie with going to football games or even watching a cross country race, that kind of thing. And I think back in the time when there were decisions to go Division I or Division III, you kind of had to live, eat, and breathe swimming. And I was never raised that way. I would play sports, and there was always an off season for me from swimming. And I think it helped me enjoy whichever sport I was in at the time. And I think, my first job at Gettysburg was head swimming coach and bowling alley director. And I think you have to do some other things that, while you may not be so enthused to do them, it's kind of good for your soul to do something that may be out of your comfort zone. And that was definitely out of my comfort zone. We had a bowling match against Penn State. The bowling team at Gettysburg was good, and I was in charge of the alleys. And so they would oil the alley, and I had the guy come in. One time he couldn't do it, so I oiled the alleys, and I oiled them too much. And the Penn State bowlers, who are usually hitting about 250, were bowling like 70s because their balls would just take off into the gutter. And I mean, some of those things you'll never forget. But I would have never had that opportunity if I wasn't in D3. And I think in D3 also, I mean, when you first go to Gettysburg, you say, "Hey, I'm going to be here 5 years," and then go to Indiana. That's just not quite the way it works, And it's like, but I enjoyed the environment. I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed playing tennis at lunchtime, And I think there's less of a rush to try to win, but we always had the philosophy to try to work with people towards helping them improve, and I think you could do that at every level. So
Oh, that's good insight. I think, was there anything within having to sort of be, I don't know, in the bowling scene, or like sort of directing that bowling scene at Gettysburg, that was transferable to the swim pool? Is that even, possible, or anything that you learned from that experience? Because that's certainly, I don't know,
yeah,
pretty unique.
I think part of it was you really learn how much you valued the piece that you loved the most, which was the swimming, because I didn't love the other piece. And in fact, after 1 year, they gave me a job promotion by taking the bowling alley away. But then I had to become the guy who taught all the swim classes. I had to get my water safety instructor, and that's a lot of work. Teaching a WSI class in phys ed is a lot different than teaching a racquetball class, because the Red Cross wanted 36 hours. Well, that's a boatload of time for one semester just for one of your courses. So I did that, and you pay the dues, and it just makes you a better coach. I still think, we use some of the flotation devices that we were using, the rescue tubes and stuff, as part of our training after a while. It was just became almost sort of natural to tie two things in. So
Yeah.
I think that got me just to love swimming that much more.
Yeah, and it makes you appreciate the actual swimming that much more for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
good. Well, I wanted to ask you, what were some pivotal moments or learning experience in your early coaching career? I guess particularly at Gettysburg.
Yeah. One of the things was that, I was coming from North Carolina, and Gettysburg was, they had done well in swimming, but all the kids were jacked because they had this, Division I coach coming in, and they think we're going to just be world beaters. Well, we went, and I kind of tapered them similar to what I knew, and we were terrible at our first conference meet. And I remember just sitting there and saying, okay, this isn't Division I, and I'm not, name any big time coach. I'm not that person. I need to run the program here, do some things, beg, borrow, and steal from others, but implement them in our program and taper these athletes different than the ones at North Carolina. And I think that was a real valuable lesson, to fail early and then to realize that, you work with the people you have. You borrow from some of the top programs. Like, I love borrowing from some of the sprint programs that are so successful these days, because they're doing fun stuff too. But you put them on your intervals, your team's intervals. You do it within your personalities, and I think it really helped me create a situation where uh, we wanted to run a program where the athletes could bring their personality to practice, but within a team concept. So we have a bunch more individuals, and not mold everybody as this is how the sprint group's going to taper, because that didn't work the first time. So that was a great learning tool. And then I think, there's a difference between doing hard work and working hard. And it sounds weird, but if you're just doing hard work and the athletes don't see the sense of purpose for that towards the long term vision, it becomes a pretty toxic locker room, and it becomes a toxic, hey, I'm working my butt off, right? But why am I working so hard? And if they don't get that point of, it's fine to work hard, but let's just say there's a difference in just doing hard work. Like, hard work for the sake of, all work and no play is going to make Johnny or Susie really resent it if they don't hit their best times. But if they work hard and do their best, that's my big thing now. Just do your best wherever you are, and then we can learn from it, whether it's early in a October dual meet, or if it's at the end of the year. You want to try to learn along the way, so you hit it at the end of the year. But I really think that that's a big thing, the difference between working hard and just doing hard work for the sake of, because that's what swimmers are supposed to do. No, you got to get in their heads a little bit for them to see that this is good for them within a team setting. So.
Let's say, like, when you're going to, address a swimmer or you just address your team and you're noticing that they're maybe off that day. It's one of those days where it's just harder to get in the pool. Like it's just, post training trip, you're beat up, your bodies are sore, and you got to get in, and you got to, you got to do a hard set. You got to face that challenge. Like, how do you sort of get that across to your swimmers in moments like those where, you're trying to still hold the message of, hey, like there's a difference between, working hard and doing the hard work. But it's one of those days where it's just harder to get that across. How do you sort of relay that message?
Yeah, and I think during those times, there's a lot of, how it works. There could be a lot of complaining, and that can be really toxic. So would sit our team down and say, hey, you can wake up each day and make the decision to either contribute or complain. And your teammates are going to respect you a whole lot more and enjoy being there with them if you're contributing to something greater than yourself. And I think when you have some of those tough days where it's the woe is me, nobody really likes that after a while. In other words, there's not a teammate out there that likes somebody who constantly feels sorry for themselves, and you get that sometimes. Now, empathy is a different thing, but I truly try to get them to understand that there's something greater than themselves, and then also we tweak it a little bit to where maybe during warm up, we'll turn it into like a summer pool activity where they can do some dolphin dives, they can do some tuck jumps off the bottom. There's a lot of different ways to warm up the body without just swimming up and down the black line. So, you kind of, as a coach, that might be what you call the X factor, is just trying to get to know your team and get to know individuals and just say, okay, here's the time when, we may need to have a little bit more fun and then get back to, purposeful fun. Um, and I even believe that on the trips, the training trip. I think so many teams just pound people into smithereens, and it's weird because I look back and we did that, but and then I look back and one change we made. Why are we doing that if it's 6 weeks away from a conference meet? If we're killing them, it's 6 weeks away from the conference meet. When we recover, we're just getting to the point where we want to be, you know, before we go, so you really want to, fine tune it a little bit and just make sure that they understand that you value the things that will help them improve and not so much train just to get tired. Help them get faster, not just train to get tired. We did, 100 hundreds today, New Year's Day on 115. Well, that's fine, but maybe mentally you want that to toughen them up. But I think there's other ways to get more out of them, mentally and physically. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. I like the piece where you said you can either choose to contribute or complain. I think that's a nice piece for swimmers that may be listening in out there. I think that's a really just a good thing to sort of think about when you're showing up for practice, day in and day out, even on those hard days. Like we can all acknowledge that it's going to be hard, but yeah, are you going to just sit there and feel sorry for yourself and just complain, or are you going to just sort of find the small things to be happy about within a certain training day. And
Seamus, one more thing that we would do is I would preach a lot to them, and I hate using the word preach, but we talk a lot about what we call shooting for the 9.9 because 10's perfect. Well, if you come in some days, and I think the point from an individual basis is if you come in some days as a 6 or a 7, having been a little bit rested and eating properly for lunch, it's easier to shoot to get to the 9.9. And then if they were having a really tough time and maybe you didn't get sleep because you had 2 papers and a test and you come in as a 2, you may get to a 5. But always you want to try to skip numbers, and the team always liked it when I would mention that. I recognize you're a 2. Let's shoot for a 5 today. Let's get something where we're doing something better. And that to me is something that we could do at a Division III or where I am now at Loyola, with the idea that there wasn't this, "Well, there's just so much pressure. I only have 3 weeks to make Olympic trials, and that kind of thing." We're still trying to get kids to Olympic trials. But I think if you're shooting for the best you can be that particular day. Now, you don't want to have come in a lot of twos. Then we got to talk to you about what you're doing outside of the pool. But yeah, I think they really like the skipping numbers piece. So
Yeah, I haven't heard that before, so I'm thinking I might use that one because I like that. It's like sort of meeting them with the reality and like, hey, this is I understand you're visibly a two and the way you're acting, but I'm not saying go for a 9.9 or even a 10, but you can meet me at a 5. Like
yeah,
let's try and meet there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I like that reaching
Which
for
is
the 9.
improved. Yeah, which is improved. Yeah. So
Right, right, which is improvement, right? Um, Good. So, trying to, I guess, segueing into your time at Hopkins, one question that came to mind were just, like, what were some of the unique challenges of being a head coach at one of the most rigorous research universities in the world, and how did you find ways to allow the athletes to flourish in the pool while at the same time fulfilling, their academic pursuits?
it's a great question, and I have to start with a pretty funny story if you don't mind. It was early in my career, and you're coming in, and I was 5 years at Gettysburg, and Gettysburg's a really good school. Um, uh, and you would get people who would be tired and missing because of classes and that kind of thing. You always understand that. But one day, a young man came in and said, "Hey, can I?" My theory on it was you either come to practice and do the whole practice. Now we can modify what we do within that practice, but stay for the whole practice because it doesn't create a great team setting if just when you feel like, woe is me. I go the woe is me again. I need to get out after a half hour. Now, if it's a family situation, that's different. Well, one of the guys said he was studying for a test. This is like on a Tuesday afternoon, had a big test on Friday. And he came into the office and said, I only want to get out a half hour early. And I said, look, that half hour is not going to make the difference in whether you get a great grade or not. He interrupted me and he said, and this was some of the mentality at Hopkins. We had great kids, but I had to chuckle because I laughed right with them. George, I'll learn more in that half hour than you've learned in your whole life. So it was like you're dealing with these really smart kids who have these egos, right? And their ego involvement is how intelligent they are. And so what I would do is I would never challenge them in anything academic, because but I chuckled, and I forget, and we both chuckled. And I think the fact that I laughed, he stayed for the practice. But I'll learn more in a half hour than you know. And then I kind of went back to him the next day, and we joked about it in a joking, manner. And I said, "Look, pal," I was always kind of when I was in a good mood, I say, "Look, pal," and he goes, "You might have scored 1,600 on your SATs." But I'm close to 1,500 on my swimming SATs. So listen to me, and this is my environment. So it was really, really kind of interesting. But that's a piece of it that you had to learn how to coach some people who there may have been a lot of pressure from parents. They're high achievers. They probably never got a B in high school. And now all of a sudden in their first test in college, they might get a C. Or Hopkins had a lot of curving. And so it was really tough for some of these folks to get anything other than, the exceptional piece. So there are a lot of people in my office, like, I'm failing such and such, which means they got a B minus, and so we dealing with that. I felt like it was really important to lighten the pool deck up a little bit. Try to make it and I got this from our football coach at Hopkins, and the rest of people, Jim Margraf, just a great guy. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but he said, at Hopkins and a lot of these schools, you've got to, even though we understand academics are number one, you've got to create an environment where this is their best part of their day. And I love that, because now all of a sudden, like early on when I would wear black on tough days, and they knew it was a tough day because I was dressed in all black. Yeah, I got that from some football coach. I would come in, and during the tough times, we would try to do what I call play swimming. They play every other sport. You play football, you play the violin, but you just swim. So let's play it, and it was really kind of a great challenge, but I think they enjoyed that. And the other thing we did is we had three practices a day. If they couldn't make, either a 2:30 to 4:30, and there was an overlap from 4 to 6 with a half hour, one group was finishing up, the other group was warming up. They'd come in the morning and do the practice. And so there was an advantage to that, in that by the time the last practice rolled around, I would change a lot. And the kids on the team they described George's coaching style, and one of the guys did it best. He said a lot of audibles. We'd be right at the practice and we'd change things. And, well, what'd you do today? It was another audible practice. But we had fun with it, because we always finished with something fast, whether it was a 200 kick or a relay. And I'd always say, okay, the pool record today for the 200 kick is, and then it gave that last group something to shoot for. So it was really kind of cool. So yeah, hopefully that answers you a little bit there. Yeah.
No, definitely. I definitely like the wearing black as the sign. Hey, today's going to be a hard one. We got Coach is wearing all black today. Shoot, we gotta.
Yeah.
we
And I
gotta
don't
get
think,
it.
I'm telling you, I don't think that works in today's climate. I mean, it's like you just gotta take care of business and move on. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. But that's great. I think one piece that I did like was just you being able to sort of take advantage of the colleagueship, it seems like, at Hopkins, and say, hey, what are you doing over here? And how can I apply that to my program? Or, how do I get the most out of my athletes? And I think that piece that you mentioned right there about, hey, this, this practice, being a part of this team is going to be the break for their day. Like these student athletes are out there and they're worrying about, being the next doctors of the world and whatnot, and really just in such a high pressure environment that when they come to this pool deck, it's not for them to sort of continue to feel that pressure, in that sense, right? Like it's obviously it's a high pressure environment when we're trying to swim fast, but not in that sense. And so I like that piece where you said this is where we want them to have fun. We want them to be excited every single day to come to practice,
Right.
because this is their break from the day. So I really like that.
Yeah. Good.
And so I was talking to one of your former swimmers. He was a former teammate of mine. His name's Emil Kuehl, and he said that Coach George Kennedy was just one of the greater motivators as a coach in my life as a swimmer. And he said, you need to ask him about a specific question. And so my question to you is, why do swimmers need grit and an all-in mentality?
Yeah, I truly, my philosophy from day one was that every yard mattered, and we would start the season off with how you push off walls. And even now, we call it dip and slip. And you start at the wall in a way that helps every single time you push off the wall. It's the back half of your fly or breaststroke turn, so it's really helpful. And so I think part of my philosophy is that you come on time, you get in the water on time, and once it's time to get to the work, you can play. But once it's time to get down to business, you do it just by starting with pushing off the walls the right way, and then moving from there to every single thing that we do has to have a sense of purpose to it. So if we're asking the athletes to be all in, I always say the silver bullet is 100% buy-in. And that's something to really shoot for, but it's really hard to get 100% buy-in from everybody. So a couple of things that we would do that were a little different and I thought worked were how a lot of coaches now post the whole workout up on a whiteboard. I would tend to just give them the bits and pieces that they were doing at that moment. And, and it's funny how being all in and having grit. I was taught by my 7-year-old daughter a really valuable lesson one day. And if you don't mind me going on that a little bit, because I think it's really cool. Both of my kids would love snow days in Baltimore. There aren't very many anymore, but when they would have no school, they would come down to Hopkins and run around the gym. And our athletic department was great. The AD said, "Hey, you know, you're in at 6 with morning practice. You're home at 6:30. It's okay for your kids on snow days for you to be playing with them and here, while still doing your job." So I really respected that. There was, we never felt like that's one thing. We never felt we were punching a time clock. But my youngest daughter and older daughter would bring their lacrosse sticks, bring a basketball. They would love sports. They'd run around the gym. And my older daughter was really loved lacrosse. And so she'd bring her stick and even just be throwing the ball against the wall ball they call it, and just getting good with her skills. And she went on to be quite an accomplished lacrosse player at another Division III school, Mary Washington. And so I asked her, one day, "Catherine, what's your favorite sport?" And she said, "Pound." I'm like, "Dad, that's easy. It's lacrosse." But I asked Sarah, the younger one, who was like 7 at the time, "Sarah, what's your favorite sport?" "Dad, that's easy. Whatever I'm doing at the time. In the fall, it's soccer. In the winter, it's basketball. In the spring, it's lacrosse." I said, "How about the summer?" She goes, "I don't really like swimming for you with that summer league." It was awesome. But you learn being all in to what you're doing at that moment. And, it was really an eye-opening experience for me because, that's exactly the right answer. And sometimes we're thinking too far ahead, but I think to have grit, you want to go ahead and change over time or get better. But unless you're deliberate about what you're doing at that moment, I don't think you'll get there. And so I think that's a big piece of it, was bringing it each day to practice, knowing you've done your best. And once you do your best, it frees you up for the rest of the day.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Like a few things you said definitely resonated with me, but just having a sense of purpose with everything you're doing and instilling in your team, if you can apply, a certain level of intention with what you're doing in the water day in and day out, you're going to be all in. Like that's the type of mentality where, I like that we're not looking too far in the future. This is not everything is not riding on how you're going to perform at conferences or at the NCAA's, in March. No, stay right here. Give it the best you've got right now, and those results will come. And I like how you applied just listening to your daughter there to your coaching. I wanted to ask, did having kids, did having those your two daughters of yours sort of change your approach at all to the way you coached just after raising kids of your own?
Yeah. And I think you've probably heard this before. I think that's a great question. And I think most coaches out there um, enjoy working with other people. I mean, that's one of the important things. But I think the other thing that really helps with having kids is you realize that, and you preach it to the swimmers all the time. There's something greater out there than just yourself. Like when I was coaching, and early on, it might have been all about me. I mean, you got to be a sponge and that kind of thing, um, but we didn't get the results we did as when as a leader, I think it starts with you, but it's not about you. So I think when you have kids, it's definitely not about you. I mean, you're putting your kids way before. And sometimes, you would say to a recruit, hey, I'll call you, at such and such, early on, I'll call you at such and such time, like at 8:30. So I call them at 8:30 because I thought follow through was really important. But gradually, I got to a point where, and kids want this, they want a little more flexibility. Hey, tonight I got to take care of my kids. I'll give you a buzz when I'm finished helping to put them down. It might be between 9 and 10:30. You're still going to be up. The ones that would lie would say no, and the ones that would say, yeah, I'll still be up. Everybody's up. I mean, not every high school kid, but yeah, it was like, yeah. So I think you become more flexible, but you also kind of within your daily plan, you kind of like more scheduled. You have more things going on, so you've got to be more exact. Let the main thing be the main thing and move on. Yeah. So yeah, that's really been helpful, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I wanted to ask, like, I know something you mentioned before in another interview of yours. I think it was it might have been the Loyola athletic department did a piece on you on YouTube there, but I heard sort of you mentioned just how important it was to grow the Hopkins roster from what began with 8 swimmers, the women's roster, and then by I think the year was 2014, maybe 2015, where the Hopkins team, the women's team there, swept the NCAA relays. And at the time, I believe it was only one of 3 schools. I'm not sure if that's still true, but still one of 3 schools to have done that. So, how did you grow that women's program at Hopkins? From what that was, starting with just an 8-person roster, and then developing into sort of a powerhouse in the NCAA.
Yeah, yeah, it's really a favorite. It took a lot of work. I mean, you work hard, um, and it also took getting over kind of a stigma. The men's program was generally in the top 10 every year. If we had a really good year, we were in the top 5 at NCAAs. And the women, some years we'd be finishing in the top 10, and the women were finished like 27th. And we had to overcome the stigma that we were a men's program, even though I coached both. And so I made some changes along the way, and I think it's really important. And we were able to get full-time assistant coaches. And I will give our assistant coaches a lot of credit, because I was the one thing that didn't change, but we started getting some assistant coaches from Kenyon College. We started getting women assistant coaches. Danny Corman and Nikki Kett were just tremendous. And bringing people in who knew how to win, I think, was really important. So it was always felt like I could coach the women, but I just needed to do it in a different way and with my eyes open to, more specifically, probably having men bring their personality to practice might be a little different sometimes than the women bringing their personalities to practice. And so there was no greater joy really in watching us grow, quote, a program from where we had 8 women. Um, the emphasis was on improvement, and it's harder to get a great team where you only have 8 people if you're focusing on improvement than if you have 20 and everybody's improving. But no greater joy than when the women won all the relays that year. That's for sure. I mean, that was just all smiles, and we had. It wasn't just that we had one great swimmer. I mean, you can only, unless you have a swimmer do 5 relays in 2 individual events. That swimmer, if you have a great swimmer, we did, and Anna Bogdanovsky, she was just tremendous. But she didn't swim our 200 medley relay, which was the first relay of the meet. And so we did it with, our other 4 swimmers just all doing their lifetime best splits. And so we found a way to get it done, and we thought, hey, if we win that one, we never necessarily had a big goal of winning all the relays, but we said, anything's possible with this group. And so and I think a real key with the women's program is that they started to buy into, guys love the weight room, guys love dry land. The women started buying into two things. One, a lot more dry land, and two, racing in practice. They decided they weren't hurting anybody's feelings if they beat somebody in practice. And then you get this group that's just going after each other. And we were six deep when the year we won those relays. We had three relays where we changed uh, athletes. We qualified first in each relay, but we changed athletes from prelims to finals. So there's tremendous competition. We went faster each time. I won't say I always, in hindsight, you look back, you make the best decisions you possibly could. But, I want to say that those always worked out, but I will say I always tried to make the decisions in the best interest of the whole team, and team performance. So, but that was, thanks. I ramble, but that still brings me chills to watch them win all those relays. Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think just showing up to NCAA's and thriving behind, I don't know, just the entirety of Division III and all the competitive spirit there is there, and then being able to step up on the blocks and boom, win one. Okay, next one, the next one, the next one, and by the end of the meet, you got a full sweep of those relays. I think that's truly special. I mean, I was on the pool deck this year, this past year for Wesleyan, and I can just imagine that being such a thrilling environment to be in. And you've said that aside from just the day-to-day practices, when you were coaching at Hopkins, NCAA's was your sort of that favorite moment throughout the year.
sure,
So
sure.
I can see that being just such a thrill for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so that's great.
it's a culmination of all the hard work, and it was what it was. I was fortunate that I walked into a program that had already had a really strong tradition, and that was the tradition. And so I just want to try to keep it going and work on improving a few things. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, improvement. I think that's the key word right there. So, well, good. Were there any, was there a time where you were completely taken by surprise from, a swimmer, a team performance? Any examples that come to mind where it was just like, wow, like that was just something I never would have ever imagined.
Yeah, and it was at one of the meets at the NCAAs in 2013. Um, like go back to 2011, we had some struggles within our team dynamics, and we took instead of taking our full team to the Kenyan Invitational, we took 8 men and like 5 women, and we got schmaltzed. I mean, the points in that was like 2,200, and we had 200 and some. And we had a freshman guy on the team, and his name's Nick Schmidt. Nick was really talented swimmer, and he had come in at 144 in the 200 free. Well, he did like a 141 in the Kenyan invite. So this kid's going to be pretty good. And then the next year, we got great recruits in. And a guy named Anthony Lordy came in, and he was a tremendous Division. He was a 140 point coming out of high school. But the really key, I mean, like quantum leap, unbelievable thing, it took course over time that our four guys on the 800-yard free relay in 2013 who owned the Division III national record with 629, which averaged 137 a guy. Collectively, their times in high school came in at 7:04. So now you got an 800 free relay that went 35 seconds faster than what they would have done as a group in high school. And I'm just saying, like Anthony Lordy was a 140 guy. He went to 138. Will Kimball was a 148 guy. He went 137. Uh, Dylan Coggin was a 146 guy, and he went 136.9. And this guy, Nick Schmidt, was the 144 guy, and he ended up going 136.8. So in Division III, you had guys, and I give a lot of the credit to Anthony Lordy, because bringing in a 140 guy and surrounding him with guys who had talent but hadn't done it yet, he just got everybody to swim faster. And so we won the 800 free relay, I think 2 or 3 years in a row. And they kept trying to break the record, but it was like, how are we going to break the record if they all had, I mean, like even that year, Nick Schmidt's prior best was 139, and he split 136.9. Dylan Coggin's best time that year was 139.8, and he split 136.9. And, they all put it together, and it was just such a joy. And, I'll take that to my grave, knowing that's the kind of thing why we coach. That's one of the reasons why we coach, because I've always preached improvement, and that was a huge example of it. So,
yeah, I like that. I like the fact that those, those times just seem to be, sort of ingrained right there in your mind. You're sort of giving me the time of what their high school swims would be combined, and I love that about coaches. Just kind of rifling off numbers that really stick in our minds. I think that's just a great, it's a great example of a coach who just takes a lot of ownership and pride in their swimmers and the improvements that they make, and something that you preach, certainly the improvement. But wow, so that was you said a 35-second difference? What was that from their high
35
school?
seconds. Yeah, so 7:04, they did 6:29, and they had now there were a couple COVID years, but they had the Division III. You know how records are meant to be broken. So they set it in 2013, and it wasn't broken until the 2022 NCAA. So it was a really good swim. And everybody going into that relay was talking how Kenyon and Denison were going to have a great race in that relay. Well, we did what we call coast to coast. I love a relay if you can coast to coast it, which means each leg you're in the lead, and we coasted it. Now, Nick Schmidt had a .08 relay start on it, and I'm thinking the whole time we're doing this beautiful job, I could hardly watch his leg, even though he looked gorgeous out there. It's like, did he just false start? I mean, in an 800 free relay, you don't want to do that to your coach. You don't want to have a .08. And so, yeah. So I thought, okay, but when I did, when nothing went up, we're just like, yes. And that might be, they were so excited to do that race. He came to me before the race, and he said, I would love to lead off to break our school record. And, just tongue in cheek, I just kind of said to him, well, I'd love for you to anchor to break a national record. And no thought and they did it, and he said, okay. I mean, when you get the buy-in, they understand. And sometimes as a coach, you kind of have to be not like one up, but you got to quick wit them a little bit and just say, hey, we're better than that, better than a school record here. So, yeah, that was kind of,
Yeah.
I remember that year in the corner of our whiteboard at Johns Hopkins, we put up a time in the corner for each of our 800 free, and it was really a powerful meet that year. And it might have just been the momentum we had, but the last individual event that night was the 100 back, and Dylan Davis won the 100 back by 100th of a second. And then our women's team swam the 800 free relay, and they won the 800 free relay. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys better be pumped up, because we're at baseball, they call it the hot corner. We were sitting in the hot corner, and it was like, okay, and they did it. And I almost felt too, there was always a little rivalry as soon as the women at Hopkins got better, they then would be the ones to pick the music on the bus. They would be picking the movies on the bus, because the guys respected it. Most guys don't respect their women's team unless they're fast. I mean, it's a sad commentary, but that's what I found. And so I think what was happening there was the women went out and won, and the guy said, "We better one up that and break a record or something." I mean, it was really. I'm yapping, but I think that it just tells you how cool that was. Yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think of the like as far as Division I teams, I'm sure it's similar, but just like the UVA women's swimming and diving program, and their men probably constantly looking up to that program, being like, "Hey, we got to step it up. We got to rise to the level that these, UVA women's swimming and diving program are at, because you have a plethora of Olympians and great swimmers there." But that must be a really cool dynamic, like you said. It's maybe unusual for the men's team to be looking at the women's team being like, we need to step up to that level.
right,
But
right,
when you do have that, I'm sure that brings just a sort of like unique level of excitement and camaraderie. So I think
yeah.
that's really great.
And they
Um,
respected each other a whole lot too. Like they were as excited for each other winning those relays, and that's when you know that your team has arrived. I mean, at that meet, literally, it's funny. You have to coach at the meets a lot because there's so many different events. But I could pretty much that meet the leadership from within was so good, and I think we did some smart things with the peer coaching on Fridays and that kind of thing. But the leadership from within was so great that pretty much, my assistants were just laughing, just said, "George, just sit down. We can't mess this up." And so we'd take a seat and just kind of stand up during the races and put a fist up and just say, "Yeah, that's pretty cool." So yeah, let them let them take some ownership, and they did. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Well, so I wanted to ask you touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to ask, like, you're quoted as saying that a lot of coaching is borrowing from other coaches.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to have you expand on that.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at anything we do in life, it's based on a lot of reflection and a lot of reflection learning. And sometimes you reflect on what you did and how you could do it differently. Like I was expanding on having several practices really helped our last practice and how we would tweak things at the end. This could be done a little better. But I also think you take something. I look at performance. I was always uh, kind of enthralled with performance. Like, why is it that two kids, one goes to this college as a 151 freestyler and goes 146, and the other one goes to this college as a 151 freestyler and goes 151? Why is that? Now, it might be just other outside variables entering in, but maybe that place that's getting that kind of improvement is doing some things that we could use here within our program. So that early on time when I maybe borrowed too much, and decided to do some of the things that Division I teams did in my first year at Gettysburg that just flopped because it was just such an abrupt change. But we can take some things that really work and apply them to you know the program we're in and go from there. Like just an example is um, if with the addition of so much emphasis on kicking, I saw that a lot of kids would kick really fast with the board, but not be able to apply it so much to what they would do when they were swimming. I mean, you could have a strong kicker, but wouldn't use it when they swam. So, I just looked at various things, big board and steel, and Eddie Reese has this drill called kick drill. Well, if Eddie Reese is doing it, the rest of us should probably do it. Not necessarily, but there's maybe unbelievable 6 decades of success, and it's 15 kicks in a balanced position and one arm stroke. And you're in the body position with your arms out in front. And so you're getting hypoxic work in, you're getting balance work in, as you breathe, you're timing your breathing. And I always felt like one of the keys in all the strokes is to reset your balance after you breathe. And that's where we fall into trouble, is that we're not back in the go position. So you start and finish at the go position. So we took that as something I begged, borrowed, and stealed. And then I said, well, what the heck? Why just kick into the turns? Let's do kick drill, but let's race in the red zone. And the red zone, we call that, because take it after football. That's the last 5 yards into the wall. And so under the flags, they'll do kick drill, come off the walls, do kick drill, and then race the walls. And so I think our turns were good. I would get questions, your kids in that 800 free relay shortly thereafter. Of course, everybody wants you to talk about it. Then you get kind of good at something, then all of a sudden you're an expert. And I said, no, absolutely not. But what are you doing with your kick? It's so good. And the only thing I could say is they sometimes what they don't like is good for them, but they don't like doing kick drill. But we would do kick drill, and I remember doing sets of like 3 sets of 5 200s kick drill, and you can do different things with it. And this is just an example. So maybe on the first 200, straight up kick drill, 15 and 1. And I always like taking an odd number of strokes. So maybe the next 200, you're taking 13 kicks and 3 strokes. And then that next 3 200s, you're going a fit within each 200. If you can stay with me, you're doing a 50 kick drill, then a 50, 13 and 3, then a 50, 11 and 5, then a 50 race with a whitewater kick. And you're tying everything into what you want to do when you swim. And so it was just a matter of borrowing and then implementing it into having enough imagination that you wanted to put it into your program. How can we tweak this? Don't want it to be called plagiarism, so you got to tweak it enough so it's yours, so there you go.
Yeah, no, I like it though. I think it is a lot of what we do as coaches. We're borrowing ideas from other coaches, and like you said, beg, borrow, and steal. But at the same time, you get into your imaginative and creative space, and you use exactly what you just used with the kick drill, and um, throw it into your own variation. Work with your athletes. Know your athletes. Okay, I know that I can use this to their benefit, and no, I'm not going to maybe copy and print it or copy and paste it right here, but we're going to get creative with this. So I like that.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah, yeah.
that kick drill's great. Um, just getting away from the kickboard too. I mean, I think there is something to that, like getting in, your body line, and being able to reset the balance. I think, to me that makes sense. And I like that. I haven't used the kick drill before as a coach. So that gets me thinking right there. So that's
Yeah,
good.
and you can play with it, you might, it's kind of early in the season. It's a nice little way to get your legs in shape, get turns going.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a versatile drill there. Like you said, and you throw it in 5 200s if you
Yeah,
want to get more out of it out of your athletes. They might not love it, but
right,
get
right,
more out.
exactly. Yeah,
That's great. So after stepping down from, being the longtime head coach at Hopkins, what do you find rewarding about being in the assistant role at Loyola?
yeah. I have a life. Now, and I think what's happened now, with coaching is it's not just trying to get. I always describe improvement, getting from point A to point B and back to point A as many times as you need to, as fast as you can. But there's a lot of junk you got to do along the way that years ago, it might take you, um, you know, 10 minutes to follow up with a recruit. Now, there needs to be a form filled out. The recruit can do any drinking on their trip. That the student host was with them the whole time. And, whereas if you have recruiting, 3 or 4 recruits in at once, it's okay. But the amount of paperwork, some people call it computer work, but the amount of extra work you have to do just to be where you were years ago, I think is the really tough thing about coaching. And I don't miss that part of it at all. So now, and I can say to you, I just coach. Brian, the head coach, has been great at not necessarily having me recruit, just maybe as a closer, in the office. And I don't do any of the. I show up at about 20 minutes before each practice. We have a set group that we work in that we know early in the week which group we're working with. But it gives me an opportunity to give the best effort towards what I believe in the most, and that's helping the kids improve. So I feel like as a deck coach, I've actually improved because well, there was much room to grow, but a call from a parent or a call from a dean or filling out all the paperwork or submitting entries, I don't have to deal with any of that. And now I'm tweaking a practice that I'm creating and trying to get it to relate to the athletes in their lanes. And so I think really the thing I love is that I can be all in with what I love to do, and that's be on the pool deck. I actually love, with the exceptions of championships, I actually love practice more than I do the meets. And I think it's just a piece of maybe my personality that I just think it's really cool to see if something works with certain athletes, and then um, see, the meets, the dual meets are like taking a test to me. You see if it's working. So there you go.
No, I think that's great. There's a few things that I wanted to just touch on there, but I think it makes sense stepping away from, like you said, sort of all the administrative duties that you have as a head coach, and certainly with the change of just uh, adaptation of more technology and sort of more responsibility to fill out certain forms and whatnot. I think what it all says to me is just like draining your energy from the actual purity of coaching. So
Right.
it makes sense that when you step away from that and you can just be a deck coach, um, you can grow so much more because now you're not worried about all of that other stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like you make the main thing the main thing. I mean, the main thing is getting kids to improve, and just the joy, and I think any coach would say that the joy we get is just when they're improving, is that awesome feeling that maybe you helped somebody with that, maybe you didn't, but you see the joy in their face, and yeah, go from there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, even I spoke with, my former head coach at my mentor at Wesleyan these past few years, Coach Peter Solomon. He just recently retired, and
Right.
um, I called him up and I said, "Hey, you still?" I just asked him, I think flat out, like, you still happy with this decision? Rolling around to the season, like you're not missing it. He's like, "I got to tell you, no, I'm happy being retired." He was like, one thing that I miss is just, just the relationships. Like I miss the coaching. What you just meant. I miss the purity of the coaching. I miss the relationships. I miss just talking to the swimmers, but I don't miss all the other stuff.
Right.
Um, and I think that most coaches would probably agree with that. So, yeah, I think that's great. Being able to work with Loyola and work with, a head coach there that you're really fond of. And yeah, just keep on working and on the skills of coaching and helping generations of student athletes. I think it's great. Well, good. Well, we're kind of winding down here, but I just wanted to ask, when you look back, or just look at, not even look back, but just look at your career thus far, what are you most proud of?
Uh, Yeah, and it's just that I still feel like in the moment, I mean, I still feel in the moment that throughout my career, there were ups and downs, but that the athletes always came back. They invite me to weddings, they come back to campus. And now I still feel relevant. I think as you get older, you just want to be relevant. If you're going to do something that you can help, that you're not looked at as a real old guy, but maybe that your wisdom is helpful. And so through the career, it changed, from maybe early on, it was about me. I mean, it shouldn't have been, but it was. And so I feel like it was my impact. But then you go into, it began with you, and then the core of the body was more important. And now it comes back a little bit to, hey, can I still contribute? And I'll probably stop when I feel like I'm not still contributing. So yeah, that kind of sums it up. But it's just so much fun to be on the pool deck. So there you go.
Yeah. No, I like that though. Just staying in the moment and keep on riding the passion and the joy of coaching, I think is a great just a great message for any coach out there. So that's great. And then I wanted to ask a final question. Are you a fan of get out swims? And if so, have you had any favorite get out swim or a favorite get out swim story that you can share with us?
Yeah. Get out. I think get out swims serve a purpose. I think if we do too many of them, the team starts to rely on a get out swim. But we Brian is really crafty, the head coach at Loyola, and I'm learning a lot sitting as an assistant coach, realizing that there's some things that I might not have done the way he's doing them, but the way he's doing them is it works. Like an example, our practices are an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes long. There's no crap. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's not a BS. But it's been proven in a lot of studies if you're going to lose somebody after 90 minutes. I mean, really. So let's cut to the chase and go. But in terms of a get out swim, um, we find that when there's something there, and you need to do this, we tend to do these when we feel the team's really tired, but, and, maybe you won't get the results in the get out swim. But the other day was an example. We had new season, um, new team suits. So Brian said, he told the team, don't wear your team suit in practice. So, we use them for the meet. Well, three guys came out with their suits. So, it's like you got a team. We have 90 kids on the team. So with out of 93, only three messed up. That's fine. But he said, okay, we're going to do a get out swim. And if you guys do great on this, and now we recover on Wednesday afternoons anyhow, he says, no practice next Wednesday if you hit these certain times. And so he wanted them in practice, three guys who were like 142, 200 freestylers, and one's just a big old thick guy. He doesn't practice real well. So if one guy's under 145 and one guy's under 147 and one guy's under 149, we'll skip practice next Wednesday. Well, one guy went 143, another guy went 144, and the third guy went 146. So when there's something there that they see that they can kind of like they're doing for the team, but it's also as hard as we train that we can get out of something, it's healthy. If it's too much of it and you're screwing up your training just to always have a get out swim, or you're picking the same people to have a get out swim each time, the team will start saying you got favorites, and that's it. So that's kind of it's really recent, but it's one of my favorite get out swims. So there you go.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I agree. I think, like you said, you don't want to come to the point where you're compromising, practices, on a weekly or even monthly basis for a get out swim, and having the swimmer sort of rely on the excitement of it. I think it takes away from like you said, a special moment like that. I agree. I think use them wisely and use them when you notice your team is maybe just struggling on a certain day and they need a little bit of excitement to get behind their teammates. But there is a different, like I was talking about it with other coaches. I mean, like you just said, to have all those guys dip under 147 right there, I think there's just a certain it's just a different level of I don't know, pressure or just like excitement that comes out of those get out swim moments. Like, the team's behind you, you're gunning to get under a certain time. And I don't know, there's just no other environment that can kind of create that when you're out of practice. So I think that's awesome. Well, this has been great, Georgia. Obviously super appreciative of you coming on. And I just wanted to ask if there's anything else you'd like to add you know, now's the time. Um,
No, it's just been fun to be with you for the morning, and I just want to thank you. And I have great friends in Peter and Don Megali and the folks you had on before. So yeah, I want to thank them too. But I appreciate all you're doing for our sport. And there's a lot of good out there, and sometimes, unfortunately, we only hear of the bad. Some of the hazing stuff and that. But there's a lot of good, much more good than there's bad, and I think we need to remember that. So, thanks.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a great point. Well, good. All right, thanks, George,
Thank
and
you.
good luck with the rest of the season here at Loyola. I hope the team does great. I'll be following along, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Seamus. Thanks a lot. Have a good year. Yeah.
Thank you.